Chapter 385. What's this voice? The few priests who were still conscious were puzzled. To maintain a sense of mystery, Wuming's voice was thickened. Only the other gods, Gilgamesh, Enkidu, and Siduri, who was the chief priest, heard Wuming's real voice. Lord Hyenryong. Siduri shouted in an old voice. At this time, the few priests who were still conscious realized that Siduri had become very old. Buzz. An indiscernible sound was heard. The magic circle glowed, and countless streams of pure life energy surged out of the magic circle. They were infused into Sigili and the priests who were lying on the ground. Siduri's life force was replenished. Her wrinkled skin recovered and became smoother than before. Her dry and lifeless hair was like new hair, full of vitality. This is. The priests who were unconscious also woke up. The priests felt the endless life force in their bodies, and felt this incomparably familiar power. The few priests who were not unconscious already knew who the owner of the voice was. It was the Hyenryong that Siduri mentioned, the god that they were desperately hoping for. A light appeared in the center of the magic circle, and a white figure appeared. He wore a pure white robe and had a handsome face. A golden chain was wrapped around the white figure like an ornament. There were also 4 dragon horns on his head. If one looked closely, one could see that one of the dragon horns was definitely an ornament. It's been a long time, Siduri. Wuming smiled at Siduri, who was kneeling in front of him. His smile was extremely dazzling. Lord Hyenryong, congratulations on your return. Siduri knelt down and congratulated Wuming. The other priests did the same and knelt down to Wuming. Congratulations on your return, Lord Hyenryong. After all, it was the first time that Lord Hyenryong appeared in human form. So the priests were especially respectful. The invisible dragon god was revered, and the dragon god in human form was even more revered. Being too mysterious would cause a distance. This was also why Siduri insisted on summoning Wuming. After Siduri became the chief priest, Wuming revealed his true form. Although I have already replenished the life force that you lack, it's better to rest a little. Wuming ordered the priests under him. After all, strictly speaking, these priests were all under his command, and were his subordinates. Yes, we will follow your instructions, Lord Xianlong. Everyone said in unison. Then the priests left, and only Siduri was left. What's wrong, Siduri? Aren't you going to rest? Wuming asked. Lord Hyenryong, Mesopotamia is in danger now, and we need your help. Siduri maintained her kneeling position, and waited for Wuming's answer. I know, but your health is the most important thing. You go rest first. I will personally look for King Gilgamesh to understand the situation. Wuming said gently. Looking at Siduri, who was about to refute, Wuming's expression suddenly became serious. This is an order. After all, Siduri was extremely stubborn. She would not listen to anything unless it was an order. Understood. I will go back and rest, Lord Hyenryong. Then, Siduri left Hyenryong's temple without hesitation. Where's Gilgamesh? I don't think it's the female Gilgamesh I know. With that, Wuming went to the divine tower in the center of Uruk. Wuming walked on the road and looked at the modern business atmosphere with interest. As expected, no matter which Gil it is, they can all become the wise king. It's Lord Hyenryong. Lord Hyenryong is back. Lord Hyenryong. In an instant, countless people knelt in front of Wuming. Wuming had just started to look at everything on the street when he was recognized. As a result, the scene of countless people kneeling and worshipping Wuming appeared. There's no need for such formalities. Just put your right hand on your chest and bow slightly in the future. After saying that, Wuming immediately took advantage of the moment when everyone had yet to react and instantly ran away. Wuming arrived at the divine tower and began to walk towards the top of the divine tower. Lord Hyenryong. The soldiers at the bottom of the divine tower shouted at Wuming. Because they were on duty, the soldiers did not kneel. Wuming replied faintly, then walked up the divine tower. That shouldn't be. Even the priests wouldn't release my portrait immediately. How did the people recognize me? Wuming walked on the divine tower, puzzled by the situation. Are you an idiot? Your return made Hyenryong's temple shine brighter. The divinity that belonged to you has returned to you. You're as dazzling as a flame in the night. How can the people not recognize you? Suddenly, a voice full of disdain came. This tone, although it's not a female voice, it's quite nostalgic. Wuming smiled. He knew who was talking. Wuming was not in a hurry. He walked slowly on the steps of the Divine Tower. When he came to the room at the top of the Divine Tower, because there was no door, Wuming directly saw the scene inside. The blonde man was wearing a rather simple, but kingly clothes. He was sitting in front of a wooden table dealing with government affairs on a clay tablet. Seeing Wuming coming here, the blonde man put down the clay tablet in his hand and looked at Wuming with a proud smile. It's been a long time, Henryong. Although the tone was quite disdainful, the hidden happiness in it could not be concealed. You too, Gil. Like two old friends, Wuming and Gilgamesh greeted each other. What's wrong? Because you came here as a servant, your brain is a little stupid? If you show your divinity like this, that annoying woman will come. It was still a vicious speech, but Wuming was quite nostalgic. In any case, every Gilgamesh was Wuming's disciple. Yes, I'm sorry. Wuming said. He controlled the divinity that he had been emitting. The reason why he didn't control it before was because Wuming had never had divinity. Therefore, because of the rank, divinity was attached to Wuming's body. Oh, I didn't expect Siduri to summon you. It seems that the summoning ritual of the servant has to be rushed. Gilgamesh's red eyes casually glanced at Wuming, and then Gilgamesh began to throw himself into the clay tablet's government affairs. I heard Siduri say that there is a large number of demonic beasts invading. Explain it to me specifically. Wuming walked to Gilgamesh's side, and with one hand, a rather gorgeous and quaint chair was made by Wuming out of thin air, and then Wuming sat down in front of Gilgamesh. This chair was the style that Queen Sparkle liked in Winterwood City, and now it was directly made by Wuming using magic. At this moment, a tsundere female voice sounded. Yenryong. Come out. Why can't I find my father? Is it because of you? Chapter 386. Boom. Suddenly, a golden light broke through the roof of the tower, creating a large hole. The person who came was revealed. She had 2 black ponytails, red eyes, and an elegant headdress. She wore revealing clothes and was driving a boat that was the size of 2 people. See, I told you, you would definitely attract this troublesome woman. Gilgamesh looked at the person with disdain. This shameless dress, this bow, and this rude tone. Are you Ishtar? Wuming suddenly realized and looked at Ishtar. Hey, what do you mean shameless dress and rude tone? I am Ishtar, the mistress of the heavens. Wait a minute, I almost got fooled by you. First, tell my father if you are the one who made them disappear. Ishtar refuted Wuming's words, but she quickly realized that she was here to question Henryong. Then you are wrong, Ishtar. I was just summoned here in my servant form. Wuming shook his head and denied Ishtar's words. At this time, Gilgamesh also said impatiently, I've already told you that the disappearance of your god is inevitable. Not only me, but even Xianlong didn't do anything. Yet, you relied on your willfulness to barge into this king's palace. You no longer have the protection of your father. Don't even think of leaving without leaving half of your family's property. Although he spoke righteously at the beginning, he began to feel that something was amiss towards the end. Don't even think about it. Don't even think about getting a penny from me. Ishtar stepped back in panic and looked at Gilgamesh and Wuming vigilantly. I am not interested in money or treasures. Don't look at me. Wuming raised his hand helplessly. That's right, you are always like this. You are not interested in money or treasures. You only care about protecting humans. Ishtar looked at Wuming with disdain. It was as if she was looking at a money bank with no money. Since it has nothing to do with you, then goodbye. I don't want to stay here for a second longer. Ishtar said as she flew out of the roof with her horse Anna. That's why I hate that woman. She's so old. Yet she doesn't even know how to walk through the door. Gilgamesh said rather irritably. Well, that's Ishtar's personality. Wuming said as he drew a few lune runes in the air, and filled the hole in the roof. In just a few seconds, the hole in the roof created by Ishtar was repaired. Oh, you can still use lune runes? You are now descending as a rider. Gilgamesh looked at this scene with interest. Of course I can. After all, even if I am a writer, I am still a Uruk Hyunryong. As your teacher, how can I not know how to use my magic? Wuming explained. That's right, Wuming descended as a writer this time. But Wuming didn't want to descend as a writer. He wanted to descend as a saver. The reason why Wuming descended as a writer was because of Siduri. Wuming sent the Holy Grail to this era, and was about to descend as a saver, but he heard Siduri's call. She's too reckless. This was Wuming's evaluation of Siduri at that time. That's right, Siduri wanted to summon Wuming as a god. In short, she wanted to summon Wuming's original body. And she also knew that even when the priestess summoned Ishtar, she instantly exhausted her life, and only summoned a clone. If Wuming didn't happen to be in Uruk, Siduri would have become a mummy by now. After that, Wuming directly linked the Holy Grail to the summoning circle. Through Siduri's summon, Wuming appeared as a writer and saved Siduri's life. After all, he was someone he knew. If he wasted his life in vain and failed to summon Hyunryong, it would be a little cruel. But you're really funny when you descend as a writer. What do these 2 pairs of dragon horns mean? Are they funny decorations? If that's really the case, you've undoubtedly succeeded. This king is very happy. Gilgamesh smiled as he looked at the 4 horns on Wuming's head. Wuming helplessly touched his horns. Kalas was considered a decoration, but there was a pair of horns on Wuming's head. After all, Hyunryong appeared as a rider, so it was normal for him to have horns. Wuming shrugged. By the way, Ishtar descended as a rider, right? Ishtar's current appearance was obviously not the original appearance of Ishtar. Wuming had seen similar examples not long ago, such as Zhuge Kongming and Sima Yi. During the Battle of the 14 Riders, Ishtar also descended as a rider. Ah, that's right. The stupid priestess summoned the Uruk city god, Ishtar, without this king's permission. As a result, not only did the priestess die suddenly, but the woman also came to the Uruk in an incomplete rider. This king is very happy to see that woman in such a sorry state. When Gilgamesh thought of Ishtar coming to Uruk and not being able to find her father, even the gods who doted on her, she was so anxious that she was on the verge of tears. Gilgamesh was quite happy. You really have a bad taste, Wuming complained, although he was also very happy. So what is the crisis in the Uruk? Tell me about it in detail. Wuming became serious. Now I kind of miss those idle gods. At least they don't want to destroy the human race because they have nothing better to do, Gilgamesh said sarcastically. Then Gilgamesh explained to Wuming what happened. Enkidu died, and Hyunryong also disappeared because of Kanzaki's retreat. Gilgamesh, who had lost a good teacher and a good friend, was physically and mentally exhausted. So he abandoned the Uruk and went to search for the elixir of immortality. After some twists and turns, the elixir of immortality that he found was stolen by a snake. At this time, Gilgamesh also came to a sudden realization. This king, who has seen the past and the future, doesn't need to continue living. King Gilgamesh returned to the Uruk, which was about to be abandoned, and as a virtuous king, he regoverned the Uruk and made the Uruk even more prosperous than before. At this time, all kinds of magical beasts that seemed to be Tiamat's children came out of nowhere and attacked the Mesopotamia. Gilgamesh stayed in the Holy Tower and organized the army to protect the Mesopotamia. And now that Wuming was summoned, it was a few days after the demonic beasts began their attack. Chapter 387. The enemy is Tiamat, and these beasts are undoubtedly the products of Tiamat, Gilgamesh explained. And I have received information that including Tiamat, a total of 3 goddesses have formed an alliance with the purpose of attacking the Uruk, but the other 2 goddesses are temporarily unknown. That is to say, it is likely that they are not gods of the Sumer pantheon, Wuming asked. It is not impossible, but except for Tiamat, the other 2 goddesses have not done anything, Gilgamesh said while arranging the clay on his desk. I have begun to form a front against the beasts, and now I have begun to build a defensive barrier behind Nippur city. With that, Gilgamesh handed a clay board to Wuming. Wuming took the clay board, and there was a map engraved on it. The map clearly indicated that there was a barrier blocking the rear of Nippur. The 2 sides of the barrier extended to the nearby mountains. It was impossible for magic beasts to attack from the mountains where movement was difficult, but Gilgamesh had also sent people to guard it. And the clay board indicated that the beasts were now approaching Babylon City. As long as the place is occupied by the magic beasts, it will be completely turned into a wasteland. This is what happened to these places before. The people who didn't have time to evacuate all disappeared. Gilgamesh pointed to the north of Babylon City. Those were places that had been crossed, and those cities had become abandoned cities, which meant that they had been captured by the beasts. So, in the current situation, Gil, what do you think? Wuming looked at Gilgamesh. Not to mention Gilgamesh's combat power in the state of the Sage King. Gilgamesh was a powerful figure with the pariah sword. Now Gilgamesh was in the human state, not the servant state. Some people may think that Gilgamesh in the human state was weak, but don't forget, how could Gilgamesh, who dared to go against the gods in Kanagami, be weak? The current Gilgamesh was at least stronger than Gilgamesh in the servant state. This king's opinion is a defensive battle, Gilgamesh said. This king told the Uruk people a few days ago that the 5th Uruk dynasty will be destroyed, and humans will be destroyed in half a year. Gilgamesh said while looking out the window. This king is no longer afraid of death, and the people are very active in living. Didn't you see it? Gilgamesh was right. On the way here, Wuming saw a prosperous scene. Prosperous. There was no despair on the people's faces, only hope for tomorrow. The 5th Uruk dynasty is destined to be weak, but the humans of the 6th dynasty will be active, so I will not take the initiative to attack. In addition, Gilgamesh had another reason. If he used all his strength to eliminate Tiamat and the other 2 pillar goddesses, the mastermind behind the burning of humanity would arrange new enemies and even new plans. Cracking the singularity too early would alert the enemy. After all, Chaldea and the others were now working on the first singularity. According to the difficulty of the singularity, the Uruk was likely to be the last singularity. If this singularity was rescued by Wuming and the others, after Chaldea cleared the 6th singularity, it was likely that new singularities or even more would appear. Wuming and Gilgamesh both understood this, so Gilgamesh chose a defensive battle, and Wuming gave up the savior title and accepted Siduri's summon. But even if he accepted Siduri's summon, Wuming's master was not Siduri, but the Holy Grail that remained in Wuming's body. After all, the 5th Uruk dynasty will eventually come to an end. This is an irresistible history. Gilgamesh said indifferently. That's also true. After all, we haven't figured out the true identity of the other 2 pillar goddesses. It's not wise to act rashly. Wuming also nodded. But we can't let the Uruk fall too early. Then, Wuming stood up. Gil, you should know about the Holy Grail War, right? Wuming asked Gil. Of course, this king knows about it. I accidentally saw it with my clairvoyance. This king originally intended to summon 7 servants to help fight against the demonic beasts. Gilgamesh waved his hand and smiled a little uninterestedly. After all, it's better than nothing. There's no time to lose. Follow this king's summon in this tower. Gilgamesh didn't leave the room and directly engraved the summoning circle in the room. Don't you need my help? Even for you, summoning multiple servants as a human is not a small burden. Wuming asked. Wuming was now using the Holy Grail in his body as a medium. If possible, Gilgamesh could also let Wuming summon servants. No, this king can do it. Don't underestimate this king, Hyenryong. Gilgamesh smiled and refused Wuming's proposal. Wuming smiled helplessly. Then, holding the divine axe and the clay book, Gilgamesh stood in front of the circle and began to chant. Heroes of all ages, respond to this king's summon and seek refuge under this king. Buzz dash, the magic circle lit up. Because it was an unusual summoning ritual of the Holy Grail War, Gilgamesh didn't use a special spell. He just injected magic into the magic circle. In an instant, 7 figures appeared from the magic circle. Saber Okita Soki, I will serve you sincerely as a samurai Pwa. A young woman who looked like a samurai held a sheathed Japanese katana and respectfully knelt in front of Gilgamesh, and then she spat out blood. Lancer, Sparta King Leonidas, my king, use me as you wish. Oh. A muscular man with a red cloak and a golden helmet whose face could not be seen clearly and a spear in his hand began to roar angrily. Archer, Ba-Guzin at the king's service. A woman wearing a cloth armor, a long sword, a long bow, and a long sword also knelt on the ground behind Minamoto Yashitsugu. Caster Merlin in response to the king's summon, I come here, oh, isn't this a villo? A white-clothed old man smiled at Wu Ming. Assassin Fuma Kotaro, please take care of me. A young man wearing a ninja outfit and a wide scarf knelt beside Ba-Guzin. Berserker, Ibaraki Dojo, is there anything delicious here? He. The ghost named Ibaraki Dojo made a strange laugh and looked at everyone with a smile. Ruler Amakusa Shiro Shirjun, I have arrived here in response to the summons. You are. So that's how it is. What an ill-fated relationship. Amakusa Shiro Shirjun saw Wu Ming and instantly recognized him. Rider Urukhyun Ryong, welcome to Mesopotamia in 2600 BC. Wu Ming also reported his rank. Welcome to your arrival, now you are lucky to be under this king's command and witness the end of the Uruk. Gilgamesh looked at everyone with a smile. At this point, a total of 8 riders of 7 ranks, including additional ranks, descended to Uruk. Chapter 388. 8 servants descended on Uruk. Among them Okita Soki Leonidas, Ba-Guzin, Fuma Kotaro, Ibaraki Dojo, and Shiro Amakusa. A total of 6 servants were sent to the front line by Gilgamesh. Leonidas and Ba-Guzin were both generals, so they were sent to the front line to lead the troops. Okita Soki, although she was like an assassin, she could also destroy the enemy's elite units, so she was also sent to the front line. As a berserker, Ibaraki Dojo naturally went to the battlefield to kill the enemy. Fuma Kotaro was responsible for collecting information and passing it back and forth between the front line and the rear. And Shiro Amakusa was responsible for the command work. After all, Shiro Amakusa was also a sage. Whether it was Leonidas, Ba-Guzin, Soki, or even Fuma Kotaro, they were just generals. Although some of these generals also had some commanding ability, it was better to send a commander to command them. Furthermore, if it was Shiro Amakusa, it would be quite easy for him to lead a group of local generals. And Shiro Amakusa had another task, which was to monitor Ibaraki Dojo. Among the summoned servants, Ibaraki Dojo was the only one who was difficult to restrain. Moreover, Ibaraki Dojo was a ghost. If he was sent to the front line, it was inevitable that Ibaraki Dojo would rebel. Therefore, Shiro Amakusa's task was to monitor Ibaraki Dojo in addition to integrating the team situation. As heroes, they did not refuse. After all, saving humans was something they were happy to do. In this way, Merlin, Wu Ming, and Gilgamesh were left in the rear tower. Today, this king is going to deal with the accumulated government affairs. You two stay here for the time being. If you're bored, you can go shopping. With that, Gilgamesh left. Later, Merlin and Wu Ming were driven out of the tower and went to the street to start their shopping trip. After using a technique to reduce their presence, Merlin and Wu Ming leisurely strolled through the streets, watching the bustling scene around them. I didn't expect you to come as a servant. Did you have enough of Avalon and want to come out? Don't tell me you came here because you want to save humans, Wu Ming teased Merlin. Merlin didn't have such thoughts. As a half-human, half-nightmare existence, although he could feel the pain of humans, he couldn't understand the meaning of this pain. This was the nature of Merlin. How could that be? I'm very worried about the crisis of mankind. If mankind is destroyed, I will also be affected. Although I can't understand human feelings, I still like a happy ending. Merlin smiled slyly as he looked at his friend. Since Merlin was summoned, he had been looking at Wu Ming with a sly smile. Wu Ming even suspected that Merlin wasn't summoned by Gilgamesh, but appeared as a servant on his own initiative. You already know I'm here, but you still came as a servant. You came out of Avalon, who would believe that you're not looking for fun? Wu Ming said casually. Don't say that. We're old friends who haven't seen each other for many years. I came here to see you. Merlin still had a smile on his face. Since you can travel through time and space, you should go to other singularities to help mankind. When you're at the 6th singularity, remember to take care of the queen. Although she has grown, she has gradually lost her love. Although Merlin was still smiling, Wuming heard a trace of pleading in his tone. Merlin had always treated Artoria as his daughter. On the other hand, Wuming cough, as the one who captured the heart of my daughter. You have to take responsibility, my friend. Merlin begged. If Artoria is here, of course, I will go back and take care of her. No matter how much she grows, she is still a little girl. Wuming said matter-of-factly. By the way, you have the clairvoyance, and you also saw the last master of Chaldea. So, what do you think of Tachika? Wuming stopped looking at Merlin's sly face and talked about other things. Tachika. Although she is still a little immature, I have seen her performance in Winterwood City. As for now, she is already very good. Merlin nodded with satisfaction. But by the way, what's the situation with the woman who was once your master? You took care of her so much. Did you abandon her and fall in love with someone else? Merlin said teasingly while looking at Wuming. Merlin looked at Wuming with a smile on his face. He wanted to keep the goodies within the family. Olga Marie is just a little girl who lacks love. As a servant, I should care about her. Wuming said casually. What was the so-called pure bond? He and Olga Marie were, well, not accepting any rebuttals. Of even our king did not receive such care from you. Let me tell you in advance, the sixth singularity has our king, and it is a grown-up king. This made Wuming a little surprised. Merlin's eyes could only see what happened in the present, but not the future or the past. In other words, the sixth singularity had something to do with the Knights of the Round Table. I always feel that you have done something bad. Wuming looked at Merlin with some contempt. How could that be? I just gave that person a little help. Merlin continued with that sly smile. It would be strange if I believe you. Wuming no longer looked at Merlin. Well then, I will leave for a while. After all, the identity of the two pillar goddesses has not been investigated. Wuming stopped and said to Merlin. Gilgamesh said before. If you have the ability, you can explore the southern part of Mesopotamia. The north has been invaded by magical beasts. Even if the three goddesses alliance, they will not act together. Then goodbye, I'm almost done shopping. I will go find King Gilgamesh first. I don't want to do the hard work of running. Merlin said lazily. Don't want to run, I think King Gilgamesh will soon give you a task. Wuming smiled mischievously. Thank you for your kind words. Then Merlin walked in the direction of the tower, and Wuming also walked out of the Uruk city. Outside the city, Wuming looked at the north. At present, there is only one kind of magical beast, and for the time being, there is no need to worry about Tiamat's attack. For some reason, Tiamat did not appear. It seemed that she was constantly producing a magical beast army. Then I will go to the south and take a look. With that said, Wuming's figure swayed, and then, a giant dragon soared into the sky. Chapter 389. Flapping his wings, Wuming looked down at the land of Mesopotamia. Along the way, he even killed a few lone demonic beasts that came out of nowhere. However, Wuming noticed a problem. Like mass-produced clones, not only did these demonic beasts look the same, they were all wild beasts similar to the red-furred lion. Through his own senses, Wuming noticed that these demonic beasts had abnormally short lives. It was as if they were soldiers born for war. Wuming said as he looked at the corpses of the demonic beasts. How sad. Has Tiamat fallen to this extent? Although Wuming was not really a descendant of Tiamat, because of the connection between them in the legend, Wuming still cared about Tiamat. After shaking his head, Wuming no longer thought about anything else. He transformed into a giant dragon again and flew into the sky, towards the south. What a nostalgic scene, Wuming said. Back then he came to Mesopotamia by accident. Later on, he became the protector of the Uruk and Gilgamesh's teacher. Although there were many gods in Mesopotamia back then, these gods were quite obedient. Only a few gods like Ishtar liked to cause trouble. Now that the gods had disappeared, the demonic beasts had begun to wreak havoc in the north. Although it was not that the people had no way of making a living, it was not much better. Just like the few lone demonic beasts that Wuming encountered earlier, only God knew where they came from to the rear of the Uruk. If a normal person encountered them, there would only be one outcome. Mesopotamia was not small. Wu Ming could not protect all the people of Mesopotamia all the time. Therefore, Wu Ming could only eliminate the demonic beasts that he encountered. After arriving at the southern city of Mesopotamia, Wu Ming noticed something unusual. Forest. That's right. There was a forest before Wu Ming. In the south of Uruk, the land that was originally flat in Wu Ming's memory had now become a forest. The original southernmost city, Elidu, had been completely swallowed by the forest. Of course, it was not impossible for the environment to have changed after Wu Ming left for so long. However, this was the barren land of Mesopotamia. Although the Euphrates River and the Tigris River ran through the land of Mesopotamia was still barren. Although it was possible to plant crops that could survive normally, it was rare to see a forest like this in Mesopotamia. Only the northernmost part of Mesopotamia, which was close to the border of Mesopotamia, had large fir forests. Other than that, there were no forests in Uruk or any other place. Not to mention, Wu Ming could tell that the forest in the distance was not a local species. It's a bit like a tropical rainforest, Wu Ming said as he flew in the sky and looked at the forest in the distance. Apart from that, the rainforest also contained an extremely strong mana. If Wu Ming was not close to it, he would not have noticed it. This place is just giving away 300 taels of silver. Wu Ming sneered. If Gilgamesh were here, he would definitely attach great importance to this place. Due to the high concentration of mana in the atmosphere, ordinary people in this era did not pay much attention to forests with strong mana. If an ordinary person were to approach this forest, they would instantly feel that something was wrong and would choose to escape, not to mention whether they could adapt and survive in this era. This was because this forest with a high concentration of mana was like a poisonous forest to them. The genes engraved in their bones would urge them to leave, and they would die if they continued to go deeper. However, such a forest was like swimming in water to Wu Ming. It did not affect him at all. Wu Ming looked down at Ur City. The people in the south were the furthest away from the front line of the magical beasts in the north, so they seemed to be the safest. Wu Ming then flapped his wings and flew towards Ur City, ready to gather some information. After about 10 minutes, a figure walked out of Ur City. This person was Wu Ming. Wu Ming revealed his identity. The mayor of Ur City did not suspect him. In his opinion, Qianruyang's holy aura could not be faked. The mayor of Ur City immediately received Wu Ming and told Wu Ming the news. It appeared suddenly. Wu Ming looked at the rainforest in the distance thoughtfully. According to the mayor of Ur City, this forest appeared a few days ago, and the border city in the south, Eridu, had stopped contacting Ur City. The mayor of Ur City had also sent a message to the Uruk city where Gilgamesh was and asked for help. Unfortunately, the communication technology was outdated in BC, and it seemed that their message had not reached Uruk yet. After that, Wu Ming directly revealed his dragon form outside Ur City. He ignored the cries of surprise and worship of the citizens of Ur City behind him, and flew straight towards the rainforest. When he flew above the rainforest, the mana that hit him was like the hot air that hit him when he walked out of an air-conditioned room. Wu Ming frowned. There's a trace of divinity in the mana. It seems that this place is the residence of a certain goddess. Divinity was a mysterious thing. It could be said that people without divinity could not sense it through their physical bodies. They could only rely on instruments. There's a city called Eridu to the south of Ur City. It's very likely that the goddess has directly occupied Eridu and treated it as her own territory. Wu Ming analyzed. He did not know which goddess this was, and he did not know if the citizens of Eridu were still alive. However, he could confirm that the goddess of this rainforest was not a local goddess. The gods of Mesopotamia would not have anything to do with rainforests. When it came to rainforests, the easiest place to think of would be Latin America. Could it be a god from the Mayan divine system or the Aztec divine system? Wu Ming pondered. With that thought, Wu Ming decided to just barge in and take a look. With his strength as a rider, even if he could not defeat the other party, he could still escape. At this moment, creatures flew out from the rainforest one after another. When he took a closer look, he realized that they were ancient pterosaurs. Ancient pterosaurs? Seems like I've been underestimated. Wu Ming said helplessly. Roar! Countless ancient pterosaurs roared angrily and rushed toward Wuming, who was many times larger than them. These pterosaurs had sharp mouths and sharp claws that shone with a cold light. They looked extremely dangerous. However, to Wuming, who had grade A durability, they were no threat at all. Clang, clang, clang. The group of pterosaurs collided with Wuming, producing countless sounds of metal colliding. They're not afraid of me. It seems that these are all controlled by that goddess. To Wuming, who could influence and control fantasy breeds, these pterosaurs had ignored his suppression and attacked him. There was no doubt that they were controlled by someone. Roar. In an instant, Wuming roared angrily and released his dragon power, directly killing this group of pterosaurs. Then, Wuming looked at a certain spot in the forest and flew over. Chapter 390. Wuming landed, and what he saw was a city surrounded by countless vines and trees. There was no one in the city, but there were traces of human life in the surroundings. It seemed like it had been there for the past few days. Sure enough, Eric Metropolis has become the territory of that goddess. Wuming said as expected. Because his dragon form was somewhat restricted in Eric Metropolis, Wuming removed his noble phantasm and turned into his human form. Then, Wuming looked at the vines that were in the way and thought of something. Come out, Funbaba. Wuming waved his hand, and a white spear jumped out of Wuming's sleeve and merged into the ground. Woo! Following a whimpering sound, a green creature that looked like a bear or a deer with two horns on its head emerged from the ground. Just like climbing up from the water to land, Funbaba's appearance did not have any effect on the ground. Woo woo woo! After coming out, Funbaba rubbed against Wuming like a spoiled child and softly whimpered. Although Wuming's dragon form was much bigger than Funbaba, with Wuming's current human form, Funbaba would swallow Wuming in one bite. Moreover, with Funbaba's love for Wuming, if he was not careful, Funbaba might really swallow Wuming in one bite. Sorry, I haven't seen you in a long time. It's my fault, forgive me. Wuming touched Funbaba lovingly and said with a bitter smile. Business is more important. I'll make it up to you in the future. Wuming touched Funbaba's head again and became serious. Woo woo, Funbaba reluctantly called out, but it didn't bother Wuming anymore. Funbaba gently lifted its leg, and an invisible force spread out. The vines and trees that were in the way moved away as if they had grown legs. Funbaba was the mythical beast of the forest. Something of this level was still possible. Let's go, Funbaba. Wuming jumped onto Funbaba's huge head. Funbaba whimpered and began to move towards the inner part of Eldo. After entering Eidolon, Wuming noticed that there were not many trees or vines on the streets. Do they not want these people to go out, or are they simply guarding against my arrival? Wuming was more inclined to the former. After all, the obstacles could not stop Wuming from moving forward. However, Wuming felt that the other party's goal was the latter. After all, there were traces of human activity at the entrance of Eldo. At this time, people started to poke their heads out of the houses in Eldo. The people of Eldo are all fine? Wuming was surprised. However, this also explained why there were traces of human activity at the entrance of Eldo. This is Master Hienryong. It's Master Hienryong and the mythical beast Funbaba. Master Hienryong, are you here to save us? Master Hienryong. In an instant, countless people of Eldo who saw Wuming and Funbaba ran out and knelt before Wuming, begging for Wuming to save them. However, most of these people were women and children. Only a small portion of them were men. Could it be that they were sacrificed? Wuming thought. Everyone, please calm down. Then Wuming opened his mouth. His voice was filled with light as it entered everyone's ears. In an instant, everyone calmed down. Wuming directly used his holy aura to calm the people's unstable emotions. Master Hienryong. You are right, Master Hienryong. Master Hienryong, you must save us. Everyone calmed down. Although they were still begging for Wuming to save them, their tone was very calm. So what happened here? Wuming jumped down from the Funbaba and asked. After a while, everyone told Wuming everything that happened. King Gilgamesh had returned and ruled Uruk as a wise king. Their vassal cities were able to benefit from this and develop well. Not long after, news of a magical beast invasion came from the north. King Gilgamesh organized an army to fight against the magical beasts. Since they were in the southernmost region, they didn't have to worry about being attacked by demonic beasts. Although they would occasionally encounter one or two demonic beasts that came to the south, the people of Eidolon were still able to subdue and kill them. However, at some point in time, the whole of Eldo was surrounded by forests overnight. Vines and trees also appeared in Eldo. After that, a woman who claimed to be a goddess came. She said that she was the feathered serpent god. After the people of Eldo witnessed the power of the feathered serpent god, she announced that this place had become her territory. However, to Wuming's surprise, the feathered serpent god did not do anything evil after ruling Eldo. The people of Eldo continued to live their lives. However, good things did not last long. Magical beasts would attack from time to time. Although the people of Eldo were able to subdue and kill them, there were still casualties. Moreover, the number of magical beasts had increased over the past few days. Therefore, the feathered serpent god made a deal with the people. I can protect you from the magical beasts, but you must send a man to my temple every day. In order to survive, after weighing the pros and cons, the people agreed to the feathered serpent god's request. In the following days, the people would choose a man and send him to the feathered serpent god's temple in Eldo. Eldo was not attacked by magical beasts again. However, the people found that none of the men who were sent to the temple returned. No one knew if they were dead or alive. Gradually, the people of Eldo became afraid. However, because of the magical beasts outside, they did not dare to break the contract until Wuming arrived. I understand. Everyone, go back to your houses. I will talk to the feathered serpent god. Don't worry. Using his holy aura again, Wuming persuaded the people to go back to their houses. Otherwise, as Wuming expected, the men would have been used as sacrifices. However, if it was really the feathered serpent god, the sacrifice would be a joke. The feathered serpent god hated living sacrifices. Therefore, either the feathered serpent god was not the feathered serpent god, or there was something else going on. Let's go, Fimbaba. Let's go take a look at the temple in Eldo. Wuming jumped on Fimbaba's head and patted Fimbaba's head. Woo woo. Accompanied by the sound of Fimbaba's footsteps and cries, the huge green beast headed towards the temple built by the feathered serpent god. Chapter 391. Because Fimbaba was not small, Fimbaba quickly brought Wuming to the temple located at the edge of Edo. The Mayan pyramidal building towered in front of Wuming, surrounded by a mysterious and lush forest. Fortunately, the temple and the forest were located at the edge of Edo. If the temple and the forest were placed in the center of Edo, the entire city would have become a forest. Fimbaba stopped and did not move forward. Woo-woo. Fimbaba stopped in front of the forest. After trying for a moment, it shook its head and let out a whimper. This time, it was really whimpering. Fortunately, Wuming quickly stabilized himself when Fimbaba shook its head. Otherwise, he would have fallen. Fimbaba also knew that it had made a mistake. Coupled with the fact that it could no longer control the trees, Fimbaba's whimpers became even deeper. Okay, just be careful next time. Wuming patted Fimbaba's head. After stabilizing himself, Wuming looked at the pyramid-shaped temple and the surrounding forest. As expected, these trees are no longer under your control. Wuming also guessed that there would be times when Fimbaba would not be able to control them. The feathered god was known as the god of agriculture. It was easy for her to hasten the growth of plants, regardless of whether or not the other party was the real feathered god. At the very least, she had the ability to hasten the growth of the forest overnight. From the location of the other party's temple, the forest must be under her control. It was reasonable that Fimbaba could not control it. After all, Fimbaba was a mythical creature of the forest, and the feathered god was a god-level existence in Aztec mythology. Wuming jumped off Fimbaba's head and said to Fimbaba, "In that case, wait for me here. If this is the real feathered god, I believe that as a good god, she will not choose to fight with me." After all, the feathered serpent god was a kind deity. As someone who loved humans as much as Wuming, the two of them should not attack. However, he couldn't rule out the possibility that the other party wasn't the feathered serpent god. Or that even if the other party was the feathered serpent god, the feathered serpent god wouldn't hesitate to attack. Wu Ming was also confused about this. The Quetzalcoatl seemed to be on the opposite side of the people of Mesopotamia. Therefore, Wu Ming wanted to talk to her after learning that the goddess here called herself the Quetzalcoatl. Wu Ming wanted to figure out what exactly the three goddesses' alliance was, and what their respective objectives were. Woo woo, Fimbaba responded and nodded. Then, can the leopard over there come out? You've been following us all the way. Wu Ming said casually to a certain spot in the forest. Rustle, rustle. As soon as Wu Ming finished speaking, the forest in the place he was looking at shook, and the leaves rustled. It was just that this voice gave people a feeling of being startled. What? You actually found the super hidden leopard man. Damn it, looks like he's a strong opponent. With a swoosh, a guy wearing a yellow-spotted leopard suit scurried out. Then he looked at Wu Ming as if he was facing a formidable enemy. This made Wu Ming feel a little helpless. In fact, Wu Ming had felt that someone was watching him ever since he came to Elidu, but until now, Wu Ming had not found out where the person who was watching him was. After that, Wu Ming just wanted to trick the person who was watching him, but he did not expect that it would actually work. Are you still a god? Wu Ming looked at the guy who called himself the leopard man with some surprise. Wu Ming could feel divinity from this guy who called himself the leopard man, which meant that this guy was a goddess. However, this guy seemed like a joke no matter how he looked at it. A goddess wearing a leopard coat. Please forgive Wu Ming for not knowing what a goddess likes. Wahahaha, I didn't expect you to have such a good eye. That's right, this goddess is the leopard man. Wahahaha. The leopard man who thought that Wu Ming was scared by his identity laughed proudly, but this way, he was even more inconsistent with the word goddess. After thinking about Ishtar, and looking at the leopard in front of him who was laughing shamelessly, Wu Ming helplessly covered his face. Woo. Even Fimbaba could not accept it. How could a goddess be such an existence? Fimbaba, she's yours. Wu Ming did not even look at her, and directly pointed at the leopard man who was still laughing. Woo. Fimbaba replied, then lightly stomped his feet, and several vines rose from under the leopard man's feet. What? The leopard man was shocked, and quickly jumped out of the vine-catching area. It had to be said that although as a goddess, the leopard man was not qualified at all, as a warrior, the leopard man was undoubtedly qualified. In terms of monitoring prey in the dense forest, the leopard man was also an impeccable hunter. Although the density of magic in the dense forest was too high, and the detection of magic was affected, even with Wu Ming's vigilance, he still did not find the leopard man's position, which was enough to show how powerful the leopard man was. And the reason why Wu Ming gave such a powerful leopard man to Fimbaba to deal with was because Fimbaba was also not a weak existence. According to the legends, Gilgamesh and Enkidu worked together to defeat the divine beast of the forest, Fimbaba, and obtained countless treasures. From this point of view, Fimbaba seemed to be very weak. But don't forget, if Gilgamesh and Enkidu worked together to defeat it, how could it be weak? The answer was naturally no. Fimbaba had been using this stance, but in fact Fimbaba also had other stances, but because of Wu Ming, Fimbaba did not use any other stances. Even Gilgamesh and Enkidu would find it difficult to deal with it. Seeing that the attack did not hit, Fimbaba quickly released another attack, and several vines once again appeared under the leopard man's feet. This time, the vines were controlled by Fimbaba at an extremely tricky angle, and ordinary people would not be able to dodge them. You're really fast, but you're still not as fast as me. The leopard man unexpectedly dodged the attack again, and this time, the leopard man's expression became serious. Woo. Fimbaba was not to be outdone and cried out. Wu Ming looked at the leopard man in surprise, but because of his trust in Fimbaba, Wu Ming directly entered the forest. Try to capture Fimbaba alive. Wu Ming instructed. Woo, Fimbaba replied, and at the same time, said a few words to the leopard man. What? You actually dare to say take me down in 5 rounds? Then I'll let you see how powerful I, leopard man, am. Wu Ming did not expect the leopard man to be able to converse with Fimbaba, and he felt a little helpless. I always feel that this leopard man is actually a funny character. Wuming said as he walked through the forest. And just as Wuming walked through the forest, he was greeted by a big sister's hug. Let's wrestle. Chapter 392. Let's wrestle. Accompanied by a burst of unusually happy laughter, a seemingly weak arm extended towards Wuming. However, this arm gave Wuming a very dangerous feeling. If I'm caught by this arm, I'll be finished even if I don't die? Wuming was shocked. In an instant, the blonde lady grabbed Wuming and fiercely threw Wuming over her shoulder. Boom! Wuming's body slammed into the ground. The ground around Wuming cracked and made a loud noise. Ah, it's a substitute. The blonde lady let go of Wuming, who had fallen to the ground. Then, Wuming, who had been thrown to the ground by the blonde lady, changed. At a speed visible to the naked eye, Wuming's body turned into wood. Using his clothes as a medium, Wuming successfully escaped Quizzer's fatal fall. I don't dare to be caught by that move of yours. Even if my durability is B grade, I wouldn't dare to try. At this time, Wuming's voice came from behind the blonde lady. After all, it would be troublesome if he died. The blonde lady turned her head and saw Wuming standing not far away, unharmed. His upper body was naked. Oh, you've taken off all your clothes as soon as we meet. It really makes me a little embarrassed. The blonde lady said happily without any embarrassment. Because the density of magic in the dense forest was too high, and the blonde lady was too fast, Wuming did not notice her approach until he saw her. Now Wuming looked seriously at the blonde lady who was exposed in front of him. Wuming felt a high level of divinity from her. In this case, presumably, this goddess was not lying. With such a high level of divinity, no one could impersonate her except a god of the main god level. She was probably the Quetzalcoatl. You must be the feathered serpent god. Wuming did not beat around the bush. That's right, big sister. I am the Quetzalcoatl. You can call me Quetzalcoatl, the Uruk-Yenryong. Quetzalcoatl smiled at Wuming. Although Wuming was a little surprised by the feathered serpent god's gender, he could still accept it. After all, there were so many examples. It seems that the pterosaurs outside the rainforest were controlled by you. Coupled with the greeting gift just now, it really surprised me, Wuming said with a smile. After all, I don't really want to see you, Uruk-Yenryong. In an instant, Quizzer's face looked as if she had put on a performance that transcended the horizon. She was abnormally terrified. Looking at Quetzalcoatl, who looked more like an evil god than a good god, Wuming was very calm. I want to know about the Three Goddesses Alliance, and your respective goals. That's why I'm here. Wuming acted as if he did not see Quetzalcoatl's performance, and asked directly. Also, the residents of Idu told me that a man is offered as a sacrifice to you every day. I want to know what's going on. However, Quetzalcoatl smiled. Didn't I say, Uruk-Yenryong, I don't welcome your arrival. If you leave now, I can let bygones be bygones. But if you continue to stay, I'll have to use my super wrestling skills. Quetzalcoatl's smile reached her ears as she looked at Wuming with an abnormally terrifying expression. I understand. Wuming closed his eyes, looking as if he had understood. Wuming opened his eyes abruptly and said seriously, then let's have a fight. The winner will listen to the loser. Whether it's killing, trampling, enslaving, or toying with the loser, it's all up to you. How about it? Oh, it's quite interesting, isn't it? I accept, big sister. Quetzalcoatl instantly cancelled her performance and reverted to her loving big sister appearance, agreeing to Wuming's suggestion. Then, in less than a few seconds, Quetzalcoatl used her performance again and smiled maliciously at Wuming. In that case, you'd better be prepared to die, Yenryong. Then, as if he had achieved his goal, Wuming's lips curled up into a smile. With this, the contract is established. As soon as Wuming finished speaking, the sound of chains could be heard. Clatter. What? The shimmering golden chains wrapped around Quetzalcoatl, causing her to cry out in surprise. Quetzalcoatl looked at the center of the cracked ground behind her. The pristine white robe seemed to be worn by an invisible person, hovering above the ground like a ghost. Several chains shot out from the robe and extended to Quetzalcoatl's body. The chains that bound Quetzalcoatl came from this robe. Without a doubt, This was the doing of her enemy, Henryong. You bastard! How dare you sneak attack me? Quizzard glared at Wu Ming as if she was being treated unfairly. Little did she know that she was the one who had started the sneak attack. I've already said that the contract is established. From then on, our battle will begin. Why, is Lord Quetzalcoatl going back on your word? Wu Ming crossed his arms and looked at Quetzalcoatl with a smile. You despicable bastard. Watch me break these chains. Quetzalcoatl displayed her irritable yen-y and said rather angrily. Then she began to struggle in vain. By the way, let me tell you something. As long as you're a god, you can forget about breaking free after being bound by this chain. Even if Tiamat came, she wouldn't be able to break free either, Wu Ming said rather arrogantly. Quetzalcoatl ignored Wu Ming and struggled to break free of the chains. However, no matter how hard she tried, she could not break free from the shackles of the golden chains. That was not all. Quetzalcoatl found that her magical power, divine power, and other powers were all bound by these golden chains and could not be used at all. Damn it! Where the hell did you get these chains from? Not only can I not break free, but my powers are also sealed. Even the Enkidu isn't this perverted. Quetzalcoatl gave up on struggling and said irritably, What? You're not going to struggle anymore? Wu Ming laughed. Of course, Quetzalcoatl could not break free of the Enkidu. The Enkidu was something used to control the god of law, so it was impossible for Quetzalcoatl, who had extremely high divinity, to break free. If it was the original version of Enkidu, Quizzard would still be able to break free from the shackles of Enkidu by relying on his own attributes, but only by a little. Her strength had not reached A rank, so it was impossible for her to break free of the Enkidu's shackles through pure strength. Moreover, Wu Ming's Enkidu was the manifestation of the Enkidu that was attached to the main body of the great origin, Wu Ming. Once a god like Quetzalcoatl was trapped by the Enkidu that was no longer what it used to be. With the current Enkidu's ability, even Tiamat would not be able to do anything about it. I failed. I admit defeat. You win. Can you let go of me now? Quetzalcoatl removed her facial expression and revealed the look of a big sister again. She smiled gently and looked at Wu Ming. And so, the battle between Henryong and the feathered serpent god ended with Henryong insta-killing the feathered serpent god. After hearing Quetzalcoatl admit defeat, Wu Ming released the shackles of the Enkidu on Quetzalcoatl. Then let's start with the questions. Chapter 393. Wu Ming was not worried that Quetzalcoatl would go back on her word, because the agreement between Wu Ming and Quizzard would be upheld by the world. Most importantly, this was the end of the gods' era, and both Wu Ming and Quizzard were gods, so there was no need for them to sign any contract. They only needed to make a verbal agreement. Both Quizzard and Wu Ming were well aware of this, so Quizzard directly admitted defeat and let Wu Ming untie. Wu Ming did not hesitate in the slightest. So, what do you want to ask? Quizzard asked casually. Quizzard, who had become Wu Ming's slave, was not worried that Wu Ming would do anything to her. She looked very relaxed. Then let's talk about the disappearance of men in Ida first. After all, if Quizzard was really the feathered serpent god, then the disappearance of men would become a point of suspicion. After all, the feathered serpent god hated living sacrifices. They of course are wrestling with me, Quizzard said matter-of-factly, because none of them can take a single hit from me. I chose to have the residents of Ida sacrifice a man every day. They are all resting in my temple now, and when they have recovered, they will wrestle with me. Quizzard looked rather distressed that no one was wrestling with her. Ugh. Wu Ming did not expect that Quizzard would ask the residents of Idu to sacrifice a man every day just to have someone to wrestle with. Although Wu Ming did not know much about wrestling, Quizzard seemed to have used wrestling techniques when she attacked Wu Ming at the beginning. How much did she like wrestling? Wu Ming remembered that the feathered serpent god did not seem to have any wrestling attributes. How did her hobby of wrestling come to be? Seriously, it's rare that you don't fall but you can't live on? Wu Ming helplessly covered his face. Of course. Wrestling is a religion. If possible, I want to become the god of wrestling. Quizzard did not have the slightest bit of self-awareness. Instead, he wanted to become the god of wrestling. Next question. What is your relationship with the mother of magical beasts in the north, Tiamat? Wu Ming asked. After all, one of the two pillar goddesses was in the south, and the other was in the north. One was waging a war against the magical beasts, while the other was secretly expanding her territory. Wu Ming didn't believe that the two of them had nothing to do with each other. How could it be so coincidental that they were doing it at the same time? Ah, you've really hit the nail on the head. Quizhar smiled in surprise. I'm in an alliance with them, Quizhar said. After a while, Quizhar told Wu Ming everything. The mastermind had set up the Holy Grail at this singularity, and used it as a medium to summon himself and Tiamat in the north. He left a message that whoever obtained the Uruk's Holy Grail first would become the new goddess of this era, and control the fate of this era. Therefore, the two pillar goddesses competed separately. Tiamat started from the north, while Quizhar started from the south. One kept producing magical beasts, crushing the northern cities with their numbers, and pushing towards the south. The other relied on the concealment of the dense forest, and the rapid and fatal attacks of the magical beasts in the north as cover. Quizhar slowly expanded towards the north. The goal of the two pillar goddesses was the Uruk in the middle of Mesopotamia, because the Holy Grail they were fighting for was in Gilgamesh's hands. However, compared to Tiamat, who was producing magical beasts and killing humans, Quizhar was much milder. After all, I still quite like humans. This was Quizhar's statement. The protection that Quizhar mentioned was true. She loved humans from the bottom of her heart. Therefore, her method was to occupy the Uruk and obtain the Holy Grail from Gilgamesh to become the new goddess of this era. Therefore, with the protection of the pterosaur, no humans in Quizhar's territory were killed by magical beasts that came out of nowhere. This was especially so for wrestling. Although those who wrestled with Quizhar were covered in wounds, they did not die. Moreover, Quizhar would provide them with treatment and water to survive. Other than exchanging a few blows with Quizhar every day, the rest of the time was quite comfortable. At the very least, their lives were not in danger. Why do I feel like a gigolo? Wu Ming complained in his heart. Tiamat and Quizhar established an alliance to conquer the Uruk together. At the same time, they also established a contract. No one was to hinder the other, attack the other, or harm the other. Once this contract was broken, one would receive a backlash from the world. It could be said that the damage would be doubled for those of the same level. Perhaps, the moment before they attacked, they would be killed by the heavenly punishment of breaking the oath. However, a new goddess appeared not long ago, Quizhar said. The new goddess also knew that she would become the goddess of the new era if she obtained the Holy Grail. Therefore, she also wanted to cooperate with Tiamat and Quizhar and join their alliance. However, in reality, although it was called cooperation and joining the alliance, it was actually just joining a contract with the other goddesses not to harm each other. After all, it would be terrible if Tiamat and Quizhar joined forces to deal with her. Because this goddess was the last to join, and because of her uniqueness, she was not assigned any offensive tasks. Instead, she was in a standby state. In other words, the three goddesses are in an alliance. Wu Ming pondered over Quizhar's words. He did not suspect that Quizhar was lying. She could not lie because of the restrictions of the contract. That's right. It's the situation of the three goddesses fighting for themselves in the alliance. Quizhar smiled. So, who is the third goddess? Wu Ming asked. After all, the contents of the three goddesses' contract did not state that they could not disclose information about the other goddesses. Therefore, it was fine for Quizhar to reveal information to Wu Ming. It's the native goddess of Mesopotamia, the mistress of the underworld, Ereshkigal. Quizhar said the goddess name. It's her. Wu Ming was a little shocked. Wu Ming finally understood why the third goddess was not assigned an offensive task. Ereshkigal was born to manage the underworld. No god liked to manage it, and she could not leave the underworld for the rest of her life. She could only stay in the underworld. Therefore, Ereshkigal could not attack the Uruk on land. However, because Ereshkigal could not leave the shackles of the underworld, she had more powerful authority. Even if she was in the underworld, she was invincible. No god or human who came to the underworld could resist her. Even if she could not be on land, Ereshkigal could still operate from below the city. She could pull the souls of humans on the ground into the underworld in an instant. This created a terrifying scene. The bodies of humans were cold in their sleep, and the entire city became a ghost town. This is really useful information. Wuming nodded. This trip was not a waste. Since you have no intention of killing humans, how about we stop here? Wuming looked at Quizhar. If he could solve the problem of Quizhar before she was in danger, Wuming's trip from the Uruk to the extreme south was not in vain. Chapter 394. Apart from that, Wuming had another idea. After all, Quizhar was also a goddess. Even if she could not attack the other pillar goddesses, she could still keep the other goddesses in check. She could also deal with the magical beasts. After all, Quizhar was already doing that. She was protecting the people in her territory from the magical beasts. After all, the restriction of the contract was that he could not attack the goddess. Therefore, Wuming wanted to rope Quizhar into his side. Wuming believed that with Quizhar's addition, the Uruk side would be like a tiger that had grown wings. Even if it did not work, it would be fine as long as Quizhar did not expand her territory and attack the Uruk. Sure, Quizhar said with a smile. You agreed so decisively? Wuming was a little surprised. After all, I was defeated. Even if it was a sneak attack, I would still admit defeat. That's what it means to be inferior. Looking at Quizhar like this, Wuming could not help but think of the legend of the feathered serpent god. Due to being drunk by other gods with ulterior motives, the country under her rule was ruined by the other gods. After the feathered serpent god woke up, she blamed herself for her mistake and decided to leave this place to reflect on herself. In other words, the feathered serpent god was a god who accepted defeat and admitted defeat. Judging from this point, the feathered serpent god was really a good god. However, in the eyes of humans, she was still a strange god. If you want to contribute a man every day, you should make it clear. If it's just wrestling, it's not a big deal. You can also let them go home. They can come over and wrestle with you every day. You can also hold a wrestling tournament and train these people who don't know how to wrestle. That's too unbecoming of a goddess, Quizhar responded to Wuming with a smile. In that case, let these men go. I'll ask King Gilgamesh. You can hold a wrestling tournament and train these people to wrestle. I'll show them to you. For people who loved wrestling, it was good to be able to watch an exciting wrestling competition. Yes, you win. You have the final say. Quizhar waved her hand, indicating that she agreed with Wuming's words. Wuming looked at the regretful Quizhar and pondered for a moment before speaking. If it's wrestling, I can actually play along with you. After all, it's more interesting if the opponent is a god of the same level, isn't it? Wuming smiled. After all, Wuming and Quizhar had only exchanged a few blows before Quizhar was bound by Wuming's Enkidu. There was no fight at all. It wasn't just Quizhar. In fact, Wuming also felt rather regretful. His opponent was the legendary feathered serpent god. If he didn't fight, he would be letting down this fated encounter. Really? Good. Let's wrestle first. Quizhar was overjoyed and rushed towards Wuming. Hey, wait. I'm not talking about now. Come. I'll be very gentle. Dong. Wuming walked out of the temple's jungle strangely. Fanbaba, who was waiting outside, was lying there obediently. Woo-woo, seeing Wuming come out, Fanbaba cried out in joy. She sat up and rubbed her upper body against Wuming. Yo, Fanbaba. Wuming greeted Fanbaba, who was once again rubbing against him enthusiastically. However, Wuming's movements were slightly stiff. Woo-woo. Fanbaba tilted her head in confusion. It's okay. I've already solved the feathered serpent god's problem. It's just that I was chatting with the feathered serpent god just now and she was a little excited. Wuming said with a fake smile. Thinking of Wuming just now, Wuming felt helpless. Because he had aroused Quizhar's fighting spirit, no matter how Wuming persuaded her, she couldn't calm down. Therefore, Wuming fought with Quizhar. Then, it turned out that Wuming really didn't know how to wrestle, and was repeatedly thrown by Quizhar. Wuming always felt that this was Quizhar's revenge for him using Enkidu to plot against Quizhar. She didn't show any mercy at all. Fortunately, Wuming's own martial arts skills were good. After learning Quizhar's wrestling skills, he successfully made a scene with Quizhar. As a result, the jungle and even the land around the temple seemed to have been ravaged by a storm. What a good fall. I didn't even dare to use my strength against a human. Indeed, it's more comfortable to fall against a god of the same level. This was Quizhar's face full of joy after the incident. In that case, I'll go make arrangements for the pterosaur first. I'll send all the men in my temple back to Eric Metropolis. Then Quizhar entered the temple and Wuming walked out. Wuming smiled at Funbaba and touched his lower back. This guy really can't be merciful. Ouch ouch, ouch ouch. Wuming touched his lower back that was injured by Quizhar's fall, and said with some pain in his heart, "By the way, where did the leopard man go?" After all, Wuming had initially left the leopard man to Funbaba to deal with. Now, Funbaba was lying here and resting comfortably. Then where did the leopard man go? Woo-woo, Funbaba indicated that he didn't slack off and then pointed to his butt with his head. Then, Funbaba lifted his butt and left this position. Then, what appeared in front of Wuming was a long cylindrical object that was constantly squirming. It seemed to be a person entangled in vines. After squirming twice and feeling that the thing pressing down on him was gone, a head popped out from the long cylindrical vine. Unsurprisingly, this was the leopard man's head with the jacket. The person in the vine was the leopard man. Pfft. Damn it. How dare you press the honorable leopard man under your butt? I don't think I'll forgive you. The leopard man, who only had his head exposed, roared frantically and kept squirming his body that was tied in the vines. He looked like he would rather die than submit. Looking at the leopard man like this, Wuming remembered what Quizhar said. When Wuming wrestled with Quizhar, he asked her what was the relationship between the leopard man and her. "Of that leopard, you can play with him as you wish, just don't kill him," Quizhar said with a smile. When he thought of Quizhar's words, Wuming wanted to laugh. This leopard is really pitiful. Then Wuming had the heart to tease the leopard. "Did you know? Quetzalcoatl told me that your meat is of the highest quality among the gods. As a friendly meeting between us two gods, she gave you to me." Wuming squatted down and looked at the leopard man, who was in a daze. In other words, you're my slave. By the way, I haven't eaten the meat of a god before. I'm in for a treat today." Wuming looked at the leopard man with a smile, but this smile looked like the smile of a demon no matter how you looked at it. "How is that possible? How could Cooker betray me? You must be lying," the leopard man said, somewhat shaken. "Oh, is that so? Then do you need me to prove it to you personally?" With that, Wuming stood up, and then a flame and a knife appeared in his hand. As if he was really going to cook the leopard man, Wuming looked down at the leopard man condescendingly. Wait a minute. Don't eat me, my meat isn't delicious at all." The leopard man's face was pale, and he was so scared that his eyes rolled back. "That's not up to you. Help, Cooker." Chapter 395. Wuming and Funbaba left Idu. Wuming told the residents of Idu the truth and promised that the Quetzalcoatl god would return the males who were sacrificed as sacrifices. He also promised that the residents of Idu would be able to go out and interact with other cities. However, in exchange for their protection, a wrestling tournament would be held every once in a while. Naturally, the residents of Eidolon agreed wholeheartedly. If they could obtain the protection of a god just by doing this, it would be a win-win situation. Now the residents of Idu were relieved. After all, even if they were safe, it was still quite uncomfortable to not be able to rest in peace. Wuming also warned Quetzalcoatl not to continue spreading the jungle. Thus, Uar City, which was supposed to be Wuming's next target, was not swallowed by Quetzalcoatl's jungle. If possible, he also hoped that Quetzalcoatl would send out the pterosaur to eliminate the lone magical beasts that somehow came to the south. Quetzalcoatl naturally agreed. After that, Wuming and Funbaba began their journey back to Uruk. At the same time, Wuming also told the mayor of Uar City about the feathered serpent god. After that, because Wuming slightly neglected Funbaba, and the magical beast's attacks in the north were not that strong, Wuming decided to ride on Fimbaba and have a good chat with Fimbaba before returning to Uruk. Because of the journey, Wuming and Fimbaba arrived at the wilderness near the Persian Gulf. It was now night time. Wuming sat in front of a fire. A pot floated above the fire. Wuming leaned against Fimbaba's huge and soft body and drank a bowl of meat soup with a satisfied expression. Not far from him was the corpse of a magical beast. It was a magical beast that Wuming encountered along the way. It was ambushing passers-by and was killed by Wuming and made into meat soup. After all, no one said that magical beasts could not be made into food. ***. I'm starting to miss that adventure. Wuming held a bowl of broth and recalled the days when he had just returned from the demonic realm, where he had learned from Skaha and was training alone outside. During that period of time, Wuming was like a chivalrous hero. When he was tired, he would use the sky as his blanket and the earth as his bed. When he was hungry, he would pick wild fruits and hunt animals. When he was thirsty, he would drink spring water or dew before heading to Connaught. In Wuming's eyes, Skaha was more like a teacher than a warrior. Not only did he teach Wuming combat and magic, but he also taught Wuming some principles of being a human being, and all kinds of small knowledge. After all, Wuming was an old lady who had lived for a long time. Cough cough. Queen. Naturally, she knew a lot after living for a long time. In addition, Skaha saw Wuming as his younger brother, so she taught him a lot. That included survival in the wild. However, it was not very useful for Wuming. Therefore, Wuming had never fallen sick and could sleep anywhere. On the other hand, Wuming's stomach was beyond the stomach of a fantasy breed and could not digest anything. Therefore, survival skills in the wild were just icing on the cake. Paying attention to the dangers in the wild was a lifelong benefit for Wuming. After all, even the most powerful person would make mistakes one day. Even the most powerful tiger would take a nap. Now Wuming had Fimbaba by his side. With Fimbaba's divine beast temperament, no wild beasts or robbers came to attack Wuming. As for those who were related to God, they were only followers and dependents. For example, Wuming and Fimbaba, Quizzer and the pterosaur, Tiamat and the magical beasts. However, if there was really an attack, Wuming would not be afraid. After all, he had the strength. Although Wuming did not need to sleep, it was rare to spend a night in the wild. Wuming did not want to spend it all on the road. Moreover, the one who would be tired was Fimbaba. Therefore, Wuming was going to stay in the wild with Fimbaba for a night. You think so too, Fimbaba? Woo-woo, Fimbaba also cried, indicating that it also agreed. It was the wish of every Fimbaba to be able to sleep with its master. After drinking the broth, Wuming tidied up and then went to sleep with Fimbaba. After that, Wuming began to dream. He had a strange dream. Wuming came to a black abyss. It was as if he had fallen into a swamp. Wuming's movements were particularly difficult, and he could not see anything clearly. Only a sad song echoed. Wuming could feel the sadness in this song. A mother was helpless and sad to be abandoned by her children. Wuming could not help but be attracted by this song. He gradually looked for the owner of the song in the dark space, trying to drive his body back to his mother's arms. At this moment, Wuming heard Fimbaba's cry, and then he was awakened. Woo-woo. Wuming suddenly opened his eyes and looked at the bright sky. His head was a little dizzy as he looked around. Fimbaba put down its foreleg that hit Wuming's head, and then rubbed its head against Wuming's head. Its originally anxious appearance calmed down. Wuming didn't know if it was because he was hit by Fimbaba or because of the dream, but now his head was quite dizzy, as if he didn't sleep well. That was definitely not a dream. Wuming said with some fear. If it wasn't for Fimbaba hitting Wuming hard, I'm afraid that Wuming would really fall into the arms of the owner of the song, and once that happened, Wuming had a hunch that he would never wake up again. After all, his consciousness was transferred from his main body to his servant's body. If his consciousness was captured, then Wuming's servant's body would disappear, and his main body in the root would become an empty shell with only a body and soul, but no consciousness. Simply put, he would be in a vegetative state. Thank you, Fimbaba. If it wasn't for you, I'm afraid I would have died this time. You've helped me a lot, Wuming said to Fimbaba gratefully. Woo, because of being praised by Wuming, Fimbaba happily rubbed against Wuming. Wuming touched Fimbaba's head and thought thoughtfully. I've never encountered such a situation before. It seems that I have to protect this point. Wuming's body, soul, and consciousness were all born from the root, and compared to the body, Wuming's soul was more powerful. Simply put, negative mental effects such as charm would not work on Wuming. But this time, Wuming almost fell into the enemy's trap while sleeping. More importantly, the pitch-black, immovable space was the interior of the origin black soil. For some reason, Wuming couldn't feel the root of the black mud in his dream at all. Maybe it was the enemy's trick. There's also that singing voice. Wuming did not recognize it even in his dream. Wuming had heard that singing voice before. It was the singing voice he heard when he crossed over to the mirror world in Ilya's world. This familiar feeling. Wuming was silent. For a moment Wuming shook his head. In short, the enemy is not simply the three goddesses' alliance. There are more powerful enemies in the dark. As long as it has something to do with the black mud, it can't be underestimated. This time, Wuming almost fell into the trap of the song. Sorry, Fimbaba, things have changed again. I have to fly back to the Uruk. You come back first, Wuming said to Fimbaba. Woo, although somewhat reluctant, Fimbaba still knew that something unusual had just happened, so it nodded. Then Fimbaba turned into a white spear and integrated into Wuming's body. Then Wuming transformed into a huge flying dragon and flew to the Uruk. After Wuming left, a sad song sounded on the surface of the Persian Gulf, but it disappeared instantly like an illusion. Chapter 396. After leaving the vicinity of the Persian Gulf, Wuming did not delay any further. He flapped his wings and flew all the way to Uruk in less than an hour. Wuming's wings made a whistling sound. Then Wuming slowly landed in front of the Uruk city gate. Sir Henryong, you're back. The soldiers guarding the city respectfully greeted the giant dragon in front of them, which was comparable to half of the Uruk city. Gilgamesh had already informed the people of Henryong's arrival, so the soldiers guarding the gate were not surprised by Wuming's arrival. Wuming nodded and transformed into his human form. He did not communicate too much with the soldiers. Wuming directly went to the Tower of God at the fastest speed. After all, if he was entangled with the Uruk residents, he would not be able to get away for a while. After arriving at the Tower of God, Wuming happened to meet Siduri, who was walking down the Tower of God. It seemed that Siduri was Gilgamesh's assistant, helping Gilgamesh deal with government affairs. Therefore, it was not strange to meet Chief Priest Siduri in the Tower of God. Sir Henryong, you're back. Siduri bowed slightly and greeted Wuming. Oh, it's Siduri. How is it? Is your body all right? Wuming asked with concern. After all, it was because of him that Siduri's vitality was reduced. It's no longer a big problem. I'm really sorry, Sir Henryong. As your priest, not only did I not help you, but I also caused you trouble. Siduri really deserves to die. Siduri shook her head, indicating that she was fine. Then Siduri began to blame herself again. It had to be said that Siduri was a little too respectful to Wuming. Before Wuming left here, Siduri was also like this. She was clearly told not to be too respectful, but Siduri still believed that she should treat God with respect. Especially Henryong, who protected the Uruk and allowed the Uruk to develop. Especially after Enkidu's death, Siduri replaced Enkidu as Wuming's personal priest. In Siduri's opinion, she could not be compared to Enkidu at all. This thought made Siduri respect Wuming even more. In addition, not long after Siduri became Wuming's priest, Wuming left the Uruk. This made Siduri have an illusion that did I disappoint Henryong and leave the Uruk? All of this made Siduri respect Wuming very much. Siduri, I don't like humans being too respectful to gods. This includes myself. Wuming instantly looked at Siduri seriously. Siduri also remembered what Wuming said to Siduri after she became Henryong's priest. The reason why Henryong protected humans was because he hoped that humans would not have to rely on other gods and gradually become independent. There was no need to treat gods as high and mighty beings. It was okay to have an appropriate amount of respect, but too much respect was wrong. Yes, I'm very sorry, Lord Henryong. Siduri became even more respectful and was about to kneel down. I say, you don't have to be so respectful to me. Wuming did not know whether to laugh or cry as he supported Siduri, who had not completely knelt down. Yes, Lord Hyenryong, Siduri said sadly. That's why you can't become Enkidu. Wuming's words shocked Siduri. She felt as nervous as when the teacher found out that she was copying homework. Her heart began to waver. Yes, Siduri knew that it was because of Enkidu that she was able to serve Hyenryong better now that Enkidu had left. But this is Siduri, isn't it? Wuming looked at Siduri with a smile, then let go of her and walked towards the god's tower. Siduri remained in a half-kneeling position as she stood rooted to the ground. I am myself. Siduri thought about Wuming's words and said meaningfully. Wuming came to the top floor of the god's tower and walked directly into the room on the top floor. Oh, you're back, Hyenryong. Gilgamesh put down the clay tablet in his hand and looked at Wuming, who walked in. Yes, I encountered a lot of things in the south, Wuming said tiredly. This king can guess from your tired face. Tell this king the good news first. Gilgamesh smiled and said to Wuming. Other than Tiamat in the north, there are two other pillar goddesses. They are the Quetzalcoatl of Central and South America, and the goddess of the underworld of Mesopotamia. They also have the intention of attacking the Uruk. For this reason, the three pillar goddesses have formed the Three Goddesses Alliance. Wuming sat on the chair beside Gilgamesh and reported his news. This king wants the good news, Hyenryong. Gilgamesh was a little unhappy. Gilgamesh also saw that Wuming deliberately kept him in suspense. Well, good news must be set off by bad news. Next is the good news. Wuming waved his hand and smiled mischievously. Tiamat is only active in the north. With the obstruction of the servants, there is no big problem for the time being. Ereshkigal is unable to leave the underworld and was pushed to the east by the other two pillar goddesses. For the time being, there is no sign of an attack. Wuming took out the map and pointed to the demonic beasts in the north and the remote areas in the east. As for the Quetzalcoatl in the south, she used the dense forest to protect the city and nibbled away Mesopotamia little by little. Then Wuming pointed to Erech Metropolis in the south. About this king has just received news from Ur City. Erech Metropolis is surrounded by dense forest and can no longer be contacted. Gilgamesh said. It seems that the news from Ur City has just reached Uruk. But fortunately, when the enemy only occupied Erech Metropolis and did not have time to approach Ur City, I broke into the temple of the Quetzalcoatl and made a bet with the Quetzalcoatl and won. Wuming smiled and looked at Gilgamesh. Oh, you want to test the content of this king's bet? It is nothing more than the winner obeying the loser's words. Gilgamesh said disdainfully. As expected of Gil. That's right, just like that, I used the heaven lock and defeated the Quetzalcoatl effortlessly. At this point, Gilgamesh was silent. Because the Quetzalcoatl's divinity is a kind deity, I pulled her to our side. She will be in charge of cleaning up the lone magical beasts in the south, and will help us when the magical beasts attack. Gilgamesh had just received the news about the lone magical beasts. Gilgamesh had already begun to set up patrols on the main roads of the city. This is still considered good news. Then, did the Quetzalcoatl make any requests? Even if she was a deity, she was still in existence with dignity. Gilgamesh did not believe that she would obey them unconditionally. She only has one request, and that is to let Erech Metropolis hold wrestling competitions at irregular times. Wuming smiled awkwardly. Wrestling competitions? What a strange fellow. This king agrees. Gilgamesh frowned, but still agreed to this strange rule. But, it seems that you have other things to report to this king, Hyenryong. Gilgamesh did not think that such a small matter would make Wuming tired. Wuming was silent for a moment, then spoke. Hey Gil, I think I am dreaming of Tiamat. Chapter 397. Wuming told Gilgamesh about his experience in the dream. It was definitely not a simple dream. Gilgamesh also took Wuming's dream very seriously. This was not the first time Wuming had heard this song. When he was traveling through the void, and when he was dreaming last night, These two experiences, coupled with Wuming's current identity, and that sense of familiarity, made Wuming suspect that it was Tiamat. Although Tiamat is constantly producing monsters, this king suspects that Tiamat has not appeared in Mesopotamia. She is still in the void, Gilgamesh said thoughtfully. Tiamat had indeed been producing monsters, but this did not mean that Tiamat was in the northern mountains. In the original myth, Tiamat was jointly exiled to the interlayer of the world by her children. In the void, Tiamat had been sleeping like this until modern times. Tiamat was awakened by the mastermind behind the fire, and she began to produce monsters to invade the cities in the north. The inaccessible space you dreamt of, coupled with that strange singing voice, it's very likely that Tiamat hasn't escaped. Gilgamesh pondered. But according to what you said, the Quetzalcoatl, Tiamat, and Ereshkigal have met and formed a contract. This does not make sense. Wuming listened to Gilgamesh's words, and he was quite distressed. If the three of them had met, it meant that Tiamat was indeed in the northern mountains. If Tiamat was in the void, why would Quetzalcoatl say that he had met with the other two pillar goddesses? And if Tiamat had really come out of the void, why did she not directly destroy the Uruk? Why did she continue to produce monsters to invade Mesopotamia? I did not ask about Tiamat's appearance. What a blunder. Wuming shook his head helplessly. However, no one would have thought that Tiamat's whereabouts had become a mystery. Tiamat's body was huge. In theory, Tiamat was comparable to a small island. Even if she was hidden underground, it would be difficult to move. Moreover, they had to consider if they could hide her first. In that case, it is very likely that Tiamat's true body did not come out of the void. The one in the north is Tiamat's clone. Due to lack of power, she could only produce monsters to invade the cities in the north. Wuming thought came to the most likely came to his mind. This king thinks so too. Gilgamesh agreed. Speaking of which, the number of demonic beasts in the north is getting more and more. Although they are all red lions, with the passage of time, these demonic beasts have grown a lot. If there were no servants, I'm afraid the demonic beasts would have attacked us. Gilgamesh took out a new mud tablet and opened a new map. The monsters will rest at night. Although some of them look for food at night, it can be said that it is a very safe time to retreat at night. Then, Gilgamesh pointed to the passages between each town in the north to Wuming. This king's soldiers will let some of the residents in the north retreat through these passages every night. Although there are servants to protect them, the efficiency is too low. Wuming looked at the towns in the north. The roads between the towns were uneven. Some of the surviving towns were not only difficult to travel through, but the residents in the towns were women and children. It was difficult for them to keep up with the rapid retreat at night. Moreover, the map showed that some monsters had appeared even near Nippur City. It could be said that the entire north was no longer safe. So far, with the help of the servants, the north wall established in Nippur City has developed rapidly. But if the reproduction speed and quality of these monsters are improved, they will soon break through. Gilgamesh said calmly. The hidden danger in the south has been solved. There is no more worry in the rear. I can restore my real body to deal with the monsters in the north. The most difficult thing to deal with now is the goddess of the underworld, Ereshkigal, in the east. After all, the enemies on the surface were not terrible, but the enemies in the dark were terrible. As the saying goes, it is easy to dodge a spear in the open but hard to defend against a stab in the dark. For Wuming and the others, Ereshkigal, who could not come to the surface and could only do things in the underworld, was an incomparable headache. That guy has the ability to pull people's souls into the underworld, and Sumer's god, like me, can't exert my power in the underworld. Wuming was a little distressed. As mentioned before, Ereshkigal could only be born in the underworld. She could not leave the underworld, but she had obtained the power to be invincible in the underworld. As long as the gods were in the underworld, they could not fight against Ereshkigal. This king knows that guy. Although it is a bit unsuitable for her to become the new ruler of the Sumer, but for the time being, she should not do anything. Gilgamesh said, the purpose was to make Wuming feel at ease. Then there is no time to lose. I will go to Elysium first and inform Quizhar, and then I will go to the north. Wuming said, stood up. These things are not urgent. My soldiers are not so weak that they can't even defeat the current demonic beasts. Gilgamesh stopped Wuming's action. What happened, Gil? As Gilgamesh's teacher, Wuming naturally saw Gilgamesh's intention to stop him, but he still had other things to say. Actually, according to the news from the north, a hostile servant has appeared. Green hair, a perfect face, white clothes. Gilgamesh did not continue, and Wuming naturally knew who he was talking about. Enkidu? Wuming frowned. Even the chains on Wuming's clothes trembled slightly. The other party has the same combat ability as Enkidu. Although this king does not believe it, this king deliberately went to check Enkidu's tomb, and the body inside has disappeared. Gilgamesh said with some annoyance. His good friend's body was stolen, and it was very likely that Enkidu's personality had been replaced. Thinking of this, Gilgamesh felt a burst of anger. I will go and check, don't worry, Gil. Facing such a thing, Wuming was also a little angry. Although this world was a parallel world, Enkidu was still the Enkidu Wuming knew, and his nature would not change. Then, Wuming looked at the clay tablets around Gilgamesh. You should rest early. I will take over these clay tablets for you today. As soon as Wuming said this, Gilgamesh was very unhappy. This king does not need your help. This king can take care of these clay tablets. I don't want future records to say that Gilgamesh is the first king in history to die from overwork. That would be too embarrassing. Wuming looked at Gilgamesh with a teasing smile. Do you think this king can do whatever he wants just because he sealed the Gwaili sword? You're really bold, Henryong. Gilgamesh looked at Wuming wantonly. Then give these documents to me. It's not like I haven't taken care of them for you before. Wuming showed a kind smile. Don't mention that to this king. Get out of this king's sight immediately. Yes, if this is what King Gilgamesh wants, then I won't say anything else. You and Merlin are the same kind of people. Pay attention to Enkidu for this king, and immediately leave the Uruk for this king and go to the north to support him. Then Wuming was kicked out of the Uruk by Gilgamesh. Chapter 398. After all, this was Gilgamesh, the most ancient proud king. Wuming could not outlast him. In the end, Wuming was driven out by Gilgamesh. Oh, isn't this Lord Henryong? As soon as they left the tower, Merlin's frivolous voice could be heard. On the street, Wuming met Merlin, who seemed to be heading to the tower. As expected, Merlin, sometimes I really need to give you a good punch. Wuming looked at Merlin rather unhappily. Then Wuming raised his fist. That's bad. I'm not someone who can take a punch from you. Merlin faced Wuming's fist and smiled calmly. I see that you've been running a lot of errands these 2 days, Merlin. Wuming looked at Merlin gloatingly. You're right, King Gilgamesh arranged a lot of things for me. But even so, Merlin still smiled. Speaking of which, I heard that you dreamed of Tiamat? Wuming looked helplessly at Merlin. Needless to say, this guy used clairvoyance again. Wuming did not tell anyone about his dream of Tiamat. As soon as he returned, he told Gilgamesh. The only way Merlin could know about this was through the current clairvoyance. However, since Merlin mentioned it, then there must be something to say. I used clairvoyance to see Tiamat. I don't know why, but there was a black substance that I couldn't see clearly. However, it's very similar to your aura. About that guy in the north, you have to be careful. Because he knew that Wuming was about to go to the front line, he said with a slightly serious tone. That black substance should be the black mud. Back in Britain, Wuming had used his true form, which was accompanied by the unique aura of the Great Origin. Merlin naturally recognized the things that were of the same origin as Wuming. I got it. How are Tachika and the others now? Wuming nodded and asked about Chaldea. Chaldea and the others are working hard to solve the first singularity, but this is interesting. The black and white Saintess somehow reminds me of the dark Artoria. Merlin smiled, but his smile gave Wuming a bad feeling. However, with their speed, I'm afraid they won't be able to catch up with the other singularities. Wuming was a little worried. This is something that can't be helped. In the end, they still have to save their own world. With that, Merlin started walking towards the divine pagoda. Wuming did not say anything else. He had to admit that Merlin was right. Humans needed to save their own world by themselves. Whether it was Wuming, Merlin, or the heroic spirits that had died a long time ago, they were not the main characters. The main characters were humans who were constantly looking for hope and despair. When they arrived outside of Uruk City, Wuming activated his relic, transformed into a giant dragon, and flew into the clouds. Undeniably, flying was a great ability. In addition to Wuming's massive dragon relic, it only took him a day to fly around the entire Mesopotamia. Wuming first went to the southern city of Eridu. There, Wuming told the residents about Gilgamesh's new policy, which was to organize wrestling events at irregular times. Later on, Wuming and Quizhar had a fierce wrestling match. That was right. The entire Eridu could feel the vibrations from their wrestling. As Wuming was more familiar with Wuming, he did not let Quizhar have the upper hand in the wrestling match even though he did not have the upper hand. Hey, I didn't expect Hyunryong to be so talented in wrestling. I'm starting to like you more and more. Do you want to go back to South America with me? Quizhar tempted Wuming with a smile on her face. Of course, Wuming rejected Quizhar. Putting aside how far they were from South America, he did not know if Quizhar would descend in South America. Later on, Wuming instructed Quizhar to do some things. Wuming did not go there to let Quizhar participate in the battle in the north. Instead, he wanted Quizhar to wait for an opportunity and try not to expose the fact that he was no longer working with the other two goddess pillars. After Quizhar said okay, Wuming flew towards the front line in the north. It took almost half a day to fly from the southernmost to the northernmost. In addition, Wuming had started flying from Uruk in the morning. After going to the south and then coming to the north, it was already night time. At this time, the magical beasts had already retreated and started to rest. Although they were magical beasts, they still retained the habits of wild beasts. They rested in the wild and hunted for food during the day. However, this was also good. The tired soldiers who had been fighting the magical beasts for a day could also get sufficient rest. Wuming arrived at the city of Babylon. This was the temporary stronghold that Shiro Amakusa had set up. Wuming did not arrive in Babylon with great fanfare. Instead, when he was still some distance away from Babylon, he transformed into his human form and quietly entered Shiro Amakusa's residence in Babylon. "Welcome, Lord Hyunryong." As if he already knew that Wuming would come back, Shiro Amakusa waited for him and then respectfully greeted Wuming. "You don't have to be like this, Shiro Amakusa. Although I am Hyunryong from Uruk, you and I are both servants. You can address me as an equal." Wuming waved his hand. No matter what, the two of them were once enemies who fought to the death. Through Shiro Amakusa's speech, Wuming concluded that he still remembered everything about the 14 horsemen. Etiquette cannot be abandoned. You are the teacher of King Gilgamesh, the Uruk's Hyunryong. Even if you are a servant, you are not the same as us. Shiro Amakusa calmly shook his head. Although I still remember the battle between you and me, the winner takes all. I have nothing to say about my defeat. Shiro Amakusa said with a smile. You are indeed worthy of being called a saint. Wuming praised. It had to be said that Shiro Amakusa was indeed worthy of being called the saint of the Far East. He spent 60 years on his wish, but it was destroyed just like that. It was useless for him to hate Wuming. Let's not talk about this for now. Actually, there is one thing I haven't had the time to report to King Gilgamesh. Shiro Amakusa smiled casually. Then his expression began to become serious. Ibaraki Duji betrayed us. Wuming frowned. Ibaraki Duji's betrayal was naturally predicted by Wuming, but Wuming also asked Shiro Amakusa to keep an eye on Ibaraki Duji. Shiro Amakusa's strength was not high, but he was still very smart. If he could let Ibaraki Duji betray us, then it was very likely that Ibaraki Duji chose to betray us, but he did not help the other side. Am I right? Chapter 399. Shiro Amakusa had been monitoring Ibaraki Dojo. If Ibaraki Dojo went to help the other side, Shiro Amakusa, who noticed that something was wrong, would order the multiple servants present to kill Ibaraki Dojo together, but he was afraid that they would fail. Ibaraki Dojo was the only remaining ghost who was able to escape from the battle with Abe Saimai, Lai Hiroshi, and Watanabe Tsuyoshi. The reason why Gilgamesh couldn't control her with the command seal was because Gilgamesh's summoning method wasn't the standard Holy Grail war summoning method. Therefore, Gilgamesh didn't have command seals on the back of his hand. Then Shiro Amakusa nodded with a smile. You're right, because Ibaraki Dojo didn't go to the enemy camp. I didn't choose to stop her. Then Shiro Amakusa pointed to a mountain range not far from Babylon. That guy escaped to the mountain. According to Fuma Kotaro's report, Ibaraki Dojo joined forces with a group of people to become bandits. Don't think that there were no bandits in Mesopotamia. There were always people who didn't conform to discipline, who had no choice but to kill, let alone in this era of more than 2000 BC. Speaking of which, Shiro Amakusa smiled helplessly. She was clearly a powerful ghost, but now she was playing like a child, running to the mountain to become a bandit leader. Wuming was also surprised by Ibaraki Dojo's casual nature after hearing this news. Then let's leave her alone for now. As long as she doesn't cause trouble for us, let her be a bandit leader. As long as Ibaraki Dojo didn't help the monsters, it was fine. Where are the other servants now? Wuming asked. Leonidas is building the north wall with the soldiers. After all, Leonidas is good at defense. Okita Soki and Ba Yuzin are covering the residents in other cities. As for Fuma Kotaro, speaking of which, Wuming and Shiro Amakusa looked at the shadows at the same time. A ninja hiding in the shadows looked at the two of them gently, then closed his eyes. As expected of a famous ninja, he's really suitable for the assassin profession. He's been on standby this entire time. After all, the magical beasts in the wild are all resting, so there's no need for him to gather any information. Shiro Amakusa explained. Wuming nodded and prepared to head out to help Soaring Sky headquarters, and Ba Yuqian cover the retreat of the residents. Then, I'll go and help them. If there's nothing important, that's all. After saying that, a white spear fell out of Wuming's sleeve. The white spear melted into the ground and turned into ripples. The holy green beast walked out of the ripples. Woo woo. Wuming rode on Fimbaba, and Fimbaba shouted. The ground automatically separated, and green vines appeared, enveloping Fimbaba and Wuming. This should be the few remaining cities in the north. I'll look for it myself. There's no time to lose. I'll go first. Wuming's voice came from the vines. Next, the vines entered the cracked ground. Then the ground closed up, leaving no trace behind. Is this the power of the forest's divine beast, Fimbaba? It's quite powerful. Shiro Amakusa praised. I'll have to trouble you tonight. See if you can find the magical beast's lair. Then Shiro Amakusa looked at Fuma Kotaro. Understood. After saying that, the figure in the shadows disappeared. The magical beasts are getting stronger, and the casualties are increasing. The soldiers are getting more and more tired. We have to speed up the construction of the north wall. With that, Shiro Amakusa returned to his room and continued with Wuming's work. Outside of Babylon, the ground cracked open, and giant vines appeared from within. The vines spread out, and Fimbaba and Wuming's figures appeared. Then the vines returned to the ground, and the cracks in the ground closed up again, leaving no trace behind. This was Fimbaba's ability. As a divine beast of the forest, it could still manipulate the vines to move under the ground. But it only did this because it was afraid of affecting the residents of Babylon. Let's go there first. I remember there was a city that survived the attack of the magical beasts. After all, Wuming had intelligence. Wuming basically remembered the location of the remaining cities in the north. Wuming's current idea was that if he didn't encounter Okita Soki and Ba Yuzin, then Wuming was ready to cover the evacuation of the people in the town. After all, the magical beasts were decreasing at night. With the cover of 2 servants, they could still safely evacuate. Under Wuming's command, Fimbaba began to move. It had to be said that God really took care of Wuming. Wuming chose a city. The city in front of him was indeed the city where Okita Soki and Ba Yuzin covered the evacuation tonight. Not far away, on the main road that connected the cities, Wuming saw the light of fire, the gleam of blades, and the screams of human beings. This time, it was no longer the Red Lion Ulidim, but countless blue crawling creatures. The tails of these creatures were high, and the poisonous needles on the tails were shining even in the dark night. Purple venom flowed on the tails as if it was about to drip down. Countless mushufu attacked the migrating humans frantically. Anyone who was stung by the mushufu's poisonous needles couldn't survive, and all of them died of poison. Okita Soki and Ba Yuzin crazily killed these mushufu. Their swords danced, and flames burst. However, against these countless mushufu who only attacked the residents, the effect was like a cup of water on a burning cart of firewood. Funbaba. Wu, under Wu Ming's order, Funbaba gently stomped its foot. Countless vines emerged from the ground and instantly surrounded all the mushufu and residents. Then, the countless vines seemed to be able to distinguish between demonic beasts and humans. They turned into sharp thorns and penetrated all the mushufu. In an instant, the whole battlefield quieted down. The survivors simply paid their respects to the dead. Because of the mushufu's poison, no one dared to touch these corpses. Then they continued on their way in grief. Funbaba gathered the corpses that had been poisoned, and Wu Ming used the Lune Rune to burn these poisonous corpses. Of course, the corpses of the demonic beasts were also burned. After all, the poisonous corpses were not easy to deal with, and burying them would only pollute the environment. Okita Soki walked at the front, Ba Yuzin in the middle, and Wu Ming at the back. The three divided the work. Thank you so much, Henryong-sama. Ba Yuzin, who was walking in the middle, slowly retreated to the back and chatted with Wu Ming. What happened just now? Didn't you say that the demonic beasts would rest at night? Why are there so many demonic beasts moving at night? Wu Ming asked. We don't know. We didn't find them when we were scouting. Then countless demonic beasts suddenly appeared. Then you came. Ba Yuzin was a little sad. After all, it was a sudden situation and many people died. Although there have been demonic beasts attacks before, there were only a few or a small number of them. Today, it was the first time I saw a group of demonic beasts attacking during the day. Ba Yuzin continued. Let's cover these residents and return to the north wall first. With Funbaba here, there won't be any problems tonight. Woo, Funbaba also cried out. With demonic beast Sama and Henryong-sama here, I am relieved. Ba Yuzin also nodded. In this way, Wu Ming and the other two covered the surviving residents and arrived at Babylon. Chapter 400. What? A large number of demonic beasts attacked you, and they are a new breed of demonic beasts? Shiro Amakusa looked at Okita Soki and Ba Yuzin, and said with some surprise. After all, demonic beasts suddenly changed their habits, making it impossible to guard against them, but this was something that couldn't be helped. That is indeed the case, and the crisis was only resolved after I arrived. Wu Ming stood aside and testified for the two. It's not that I don't believe their words, but the sudden attack surprised me. Shiro Amakusa shook his head, indicating that he didn't doubt Okita Soki and Ba Yuzin's words. Wu Ming naturally understood, and then began to analyze the reason for the attack. There are two possibilities. One is that there is a commander among the demonic beasts, and the other is that these new breeds of demonic beasts fight at night. Wu Ming proposed two possibilities. If there is a commander, the green-haired girl suspected to be Enkidu on the battlefield is very likely to be the commander. Okita Soki remembered the green-haired girl during the day. However, we can't deny that these new breeds of demonic beasts fight at night. Maybe the large number of demonic beasts just now were hatched by Tiamat. Ba Yuzin also said. In any case, this matter must be taken seriously. Assassin, please tell King Gilgamesh about this. With that said, Shiro Amakusa looked at Fumakotaro, who was standing in the shadows without speaking. Although Fumakotaro was sent out by Shiro Amakusa to find Tiamat's nest, because of the emergency just now, he used the communication technology to call Fumakotaro back. Understood. After that, Fumakotaro disappeared in an instant. It seems that he is going to Uruk overnight. Then you guys go and rest first. I will let Funbaba scout around Babylon to ensure that there are no enemies attacking, Wu Ming said. They still have to deal with the attack of demonic beasts the next day. If they don't rest, it will be very unfavorable for them the next day. In that case, I will trouble Hyunryong-sama. Afterward, Okita Soki and Ba Yuzin both retreated to rest. Early the next morning, the demonic beasts would begin to wreak havoc, so they had to rest well. Ruler, I have something to ask you. Once only Wuming and Shiro Amakusa were left in the room, Wuming spoke. Hyunryong-sama probably wants to ask about the young girl suspected to be Enkidu. Shiro Amakusa smiled. To be honest, I'm not very familiar with that young lady. Saber and Archer have only fought with her for a short while, so I'm afraid I'll have to disappoint Lord Hyunryong. Shiro Amakusa's meaning was that they weren't clear on the girl's situation. I see. Sorry to disturb you. I'll leave first. Funbaba is still waiting for me outside. Take care. Then Wuming left the place. In the room, Wuming, who had left the room, had a serious expression on his face. After all, the Enkidu in that world was saved by Wuming and brought to the root to be upgraded. However, the Enkidu in this world did not. Wuming was worried that Enkidu had been modified by Tiamat and was being used by her. Clank! The sound of chains could be heard. The heaven lock that was attached to Wuming's clothes moved automatically and stroked Wuming's cheeks. Lilin. Wuming touched the chains and took the opportunity to calm down. Wuming came to Uruk through the Holy Grail. Since the heaven lock had become his rider, knight, noble phantasm, Enkidu's consciousness naturally followed him. Wuming-sama, please don't be confused. A gentle voice appeared in Wuming's mind. If I'm really modified by Tiamat in this world, then all you have to do is to defeat me. If someone impersonates my body, then all you have to do is to punish that person. Although it's my body, I believe that Enkidu in this world will agree with what you're doing. The golden chains glowed faintly as they communicated with Wuming through telepathy. I'm not that weak. I'm just a little hesitant. Really, Wuming said with a bitter smile. Don't worry. Your body has done something wrong. I'll punish her properly. You don't have to worry about that. The golden chains rubbed Wuming a few times and then returned to Wuming's clothes. When he came out of the courtyard, Funbaba was lying on the ground waiting. Because of the concealment spell that Wuming had set up, none of the residents noticed Funbaba. Let's go, Funbaba. There's work to be done. Woo-woo, because almost all of the northern cities had fallen, a large number of people were forced to move south. Now the residents of the northern cities were either dead or had come to Babylon and Nippur. There were very few refugees left in other cities, but just in case, Ba Yuqian continued to search and rescue. The refugees tonight were an example. Now almost all of the refugees had gathered in Babylon and Nippur, preparing to retreat through these two cities to the north wall that was under construction. Therefore, there were a large number of refugees in Babylon. Coupled with the refugees who had just migrated tonight, Babylon was actually very crowded. If there was a sudden attack by a magical beast in the middle of the night, not to mention the soldiers, these refugees would at least be buried here. Of course, that was in the absence of Wuming and other servants. Wuming took Funbaba to the outside of Babylon. With the activation of Funbaba's ability, countless vines were hidden around the city of Babylon. As long as any magical beast passed by, these vines would have an alarm effect. Not only could it trap the magical beast, but it could also let Funbaba know, so that they could start to defend against the magical beast attack. Tonight, I'll leave it to you, Funbaba. Wuming touched Funbaba's head. Woo-woo, Funbaba replied. Although it was said that he got rid of Funbaba, Wuming was not ready to go to sleep, but he was ready to stay up all night. Wuming looked at the bright moon in the sky and could not help but miss the days with Enkidu and Gilgamesh. At that time, the king was still young, the weapons did not understand the human heart, and the god was still a weak guy. Now everything had changed. The king became very clear. The weapons also understood the human heart and gained friendship, and the god also became strong and had the power to protect others. In the distance, Gilgamesh put down the clay board in his hand and went to the window to enjoy the full moon. I haven't seen the Uruk moon for a long time, as boring as ever. Gilgamesh said indifferently, but his eyes did not leave the moon. In the north, the girl with long green hair looked at the corpse of the magical beast that had been burned to ashes and looked up at the bright moon. For a moment, the girl did not say anything and left here and returned to the northern mountains. Chapter 401. The next day, a night passed, and there were no demonic beasts. Humbaba hid the vines around Babylon in case of emergency. Wuming did not choose to return to Babylon, but stayed outside. Last night, Shiro Amakusa told Wuming that because the demonic beasts were getting stronger and stronger, every time the soldiers resisted, they would suffer a lot of damage. Therefore, Shiro Amakusa began to use defensive tactics. Because Babylon was not suitable for defense, everyone set up traps and various defensive measures in the north of Babylon. The purpose was to resist the attack of the demonic beasts. Now Babylon's army had been assembled, and the reason why Wuming did not choose to return to Uruk was because Wuming wanted to personally meet these demonic beasts. After waiting for a few minutes, it was time for the demonic beasts to attack. Roar! Hiss! The roar of the demonic beasts could be heard. The red lion and the blue poison-tailed lizard came from afar. Like a group of rushing red and blue sea, the two types of demonic beasts mixed together and attacked Babylon. There are so many demonic beasts, even with the help of servants, they can't stop them. Wuming frowned. After all, such a group of demonic beasts was not something that Shiro Amakusa and the other servants could resist. It seems like what Shiro Amakusa said is true. These days, the demonic beasts have begun to become stronger. After saying that, Wuming got down from Humbaba and began to prepare magic. Although I came as a rider, I can still use Loon magic and Yggdrasil world tree magic. After saying that, Wuming raised both of his hands. One hand drew something, and the other hand lit up a magic circle. Flame, ice, holy light, black fog, vines, water blade, rock, countless low-level magic were cast by Wuming, facing the demonic beasts rushing toward this side. It had to be said that no matter how powerful a magical beast was, it would be akin to a moth darting into a flame if it were to use its physical body to charge at Linley. Roar! Hiss! The magic beast's blood-curdling screams kept echoing as one magic beast after another collapsed, turning into pure mana and disappearing. This might be the price of magic beasts becoming stronger. Ever since the magic beasts started to become more powerful, the magic beasts that died would turn into mana and disappear instead of leaving behind a physical body. However, this was also good. If the corpses were left behind, it would be troublesome to clean up the battlefield. As expected, they're just a bunch of beasts that only know how to kill. They don't have the ability to scheme at all. Wuming said with some disdain. If it wasn't for the fact that there were too many magical beasts, the intelligence of the people in each city would have been enough to defend against them. But this is also good. There's no need to care too much about things like props. Humbaba, Wuming said to Humbaba. Woo-woo, Humbaba responded, taking a step forward and slightly straightening its body. Countless vines broke out of the ground, like a huge python, soaring into the sky. Some entangled the magic beasts, like a blender, crushing their prey. Some were like sharp blades, piercing through the magic beasts. Some simply tore their prey apart. Fortunately, these magic beasts would immediately turn into pure mana and disappear after death, so there was no need to care about the blood or the piling up of corpses. Although the magic beasts suffered heavy losses, the remaining magic beasts didn't shrink back. As if they didn't know that there was nothing, the other magic beasts still rushed forward one after another. Sure enough, props born for battle. Looking at these magic beasts rushing forward one after another, Wuming shook his head disinterestedly. In that case, I'll return to the underworld. Wuming used a more powerful move, like a cannon, constantly bombarding the attacking magic beasts. Humbaba also worked harder, attacking the magic beasts in the gaps of the explosions caused by Wuming's skills. It had to be said that the cooperation between the two was perfect. The violent explosions even changed the terrain, creating craters one after another. Countless vines emerged from the gaps between the explosions, creating even more craters and wiping out the lone magic beasts one after another. Soon, countless pits joined together, turning the northern plains of Babylon into a basin. Almost a few minutes later, Wuming and Humbaba stopped attacking. Smoke filled the northern part of Babylon, and countless magic beasts turned into pure mana particles, leaving only the changed terrain, proving that the magic beasts once existed. However, Wuming didn't show an expression that he had finished, but looked at the smoke in front of him solemnly. The number of magic beasts couldn't be this small. There was no doubt that the magic beasts that only knew how to attack temporarily retreated. If that was the case, then there must be something similar to a commander. Could it be? Just as Wuming was worried, a figure walked out of the smoke. Long green hair, a rare beauty, and white clothes that didn't have a single speck of dust on them. Without a doubt, this was Enkidu, who was originally dead. Putting that aside, Wuming sensed a special energy from Enkidu's body. Then Wuming spoke. As expected, the rest of the magic beasts retreated under your command. Wuming looked at Enkidu with an indescribable expression. Master Hyenryong, long time no see. Enkidu said to Wuming as if they hadn't seen each other for a long time. Don't give me that. Am I worth it? You're not Enkidu. Wuming's expression didn't change at all as he said calmly. As expected, pretending in front of me will definitely get exposed. Enkidu said self-deprecatingly, then showed a proud expression. To be honest, this body misses you very much. I can't help but respect and love you, Master Hyenryong. Enkidu smiled calmly and didn't feel annoyed that he was exposed. Although you're using Enkidu's body, your performance is too different from Enkidu's. I can tell that you're a fake with one look. Wuming said calmly. It can't be helped, I'm just a fake. Enkidu didn't get angry at Wuming's words and replied with a smile. Let me tell you, I'm very angry that I'm using Enkidu's body. Wuming closed his eyes, then suddenly opened them and looked at Enkidu. This gaze made Enkidu tremble with fear, as if he was looking directly at death. A trace of cold sweat trickled down his back. Let's put this aside for now. I'm going to ask you directly, is your heart the Holy Grail? That you're tuning in to the Echoes of the Heart YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.